Greetings, Earthlings and non-Earthlings. Welcome to the Universal Diner. All are welcome here. As usual, we are cozied up in our spacious corner booth. There's always room for you, always room for our occasional guests to drop by, especially cats, and always room for light and love. Join us now as we explore within and share without. Simone, brother, great to be here with you as always.
Yes.
Yes. Hey guys. Good to
How
see
we
you.
feeling?
Hello.
How are we feeling? Are we hungry?
Let's eat.
I think I'll stick with my beverage.
Okay. Well, we have to order something that'll kick us out. We know how this goes.
Speaking of cats, there's one that just passed by.
I see. I guess it got the message. He, she.
She.
We love cats, by the way.
Animal
So,
lovers in general, but special tribute for
definitely.
cats.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm quite hungry, and there are several dishes that I could choose from. One of them is community. Another is medicine, as in plant medicine. Another is in the manifestation of being, the I am realm, or as I've called it with brother for the last several months, Nevilling, in honor of Neville Goddard. We could get all of these and share, top us.
Sounds good. It definitely sounds like my life over the last 10 years. Yeah. All the major themes of my life over the last 10 years.
Great. Well, maybe you can go in the kitchen and help the chef.
Huh. Yeah, I can do that for sure.
Well, let's start with community, shall we? Our relationship to it, perhaps, and the importance of it as we see it. And, all of this, of course, in service of you, the listener, who might be able to glean something, perhaps relate to or aspire to something that we bring forth.
I find it kind of humorous that we would be talking about community when I think all three of us are pretty much hermits.
Oh, the irony.
Yeah.
Of needing to be in our own silos just to record about togetherness.
Yeah. But that's the key, isn't it? It's about togetherness and what that means and how that looks for individual people like us.
Well, brother is the one who's most ensconced in community right now in different ways, in different spheres of influence. I'm thinking of the Russian nesting dolls in part. I'm thinking of the valley that brother lives in, and then the smaller community within it. Care to share, brother?
And being in a family community too.
That's what I was alluding to.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Allowing him to ease into that subject.
Yeah, when I think about community and look back over the last 20 years of my life since I left the US, I see so many different expressions of community in my journey since leaving the US, and from living a very nomadic type of life, going from one community to another, living in little spiritual bubbles in Thailand, where you guys are, and in Peru, to actually consciously creating a community in Spain, and then now being here in Portugal, where another community type setting, but all different expressions. And then, of course, the family coming along, and that's over the last 10 years as well. Yeah, what to say about community? I mean, I left the US and I started being drawn to these different yogic communities, spiritual communities, ending up in Thailand and getting a taste of what it feels like to be surrounded after feeling so alien to my life in the US and feeling very isolated, even though I was very immersed in the world back then, and in my life there, feeling very alienated. And it wasn't until I went to Thailand and connected with the yoga community there, I experienced community of like-minded and like-hearted people, and felt much more seen and much more accepted, and not as alien. And it was definitely a very, very nice feeling of being able to be myself fully, and express myself much more openly, and allow for that expression to be received by others. And then ayahuasca found me, and I ended up going to Peru and sitting with the medicine for the first time, and then going back to Thailand, to my community there, and inviting the medicine to come to Thailand. And of course, that's where we all met, when Diego Palma came to Thailand. And I remember on that retreat specifically, after the very first night of the ceremony, which was absolute chaotic beauty. This ceremony was the craziest, most amazing ceremony. Yeah, I remember. And I remember waking up the next morning, and there was 30 individuals in the retreat. 29 of us had never drank medicine before. And after this first evening of the retreat, the next morning, everybody showed up for breakfast at the buffet. And essentially, we were all strangers, if you will, before the retreat. And after that one evening, we showed up for breakfast the next morning, and everyone was brothers and sisters. There was just nothing but love with everyone, and everyone was hugging, and everyone was smiling, and everyone was just deeply connected after one night. And I remember feeling like, oh my God, this is what I've been searching for my whole life. This is it. This is the way to be living as brothers and sisters. And I remember going up to Diego at that point and saying, brother, this is it. This is it. This is what I've been searching for my whole life. I'm moving to Peru. I want to keep working with the medicine. I want to be a part of this community. And it just made so much sense to me. You know, it was just like everything that I wasn't even aware of what I was searching for my whole life. It just, there it was. And seeing everyone from all parts of the world, all different backgrounds, none of that mattered after the first evening. All that was wiped away. And we were just beautiful brothers and sisters, all children of the universe, connecting and meeting in that heart-centered space. And I was hooked. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to Peru. And several weeks later, I ended up packing up, and about a third of the retreat participants came with me and ended up moving to Peru with me. And we moved right across the street from Diego. And yeah, and then my life there, living in this medicine community in Pisaq, Peru began. And that was a magical, beautiful time for almost 5 years. And then going from there to Holland and continuing my work with the medicine. And then at some point, the medicine started sharing with me, okay, now it's time for you to start your own community. And I ended up following through on that and creating an intentional community in Spain. I don't know, there's so much to say about community. I mean, I feel like it's such it's tribal and indigenous, and yet it's new the way it's being approached today. I remember my first experience with community was when I went to Bali. And I remember booking the trip. I Googled spiritual journey Asia, and I saw a shaman taking people to Bali. If you've been to Bali, you understand the beauty and the magic of Bali. And if you haven't been to Bali, it's just one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful, magical, unique places on the planet. And I arrive at Bali, and it's like a whole 180 degrees from the US and from what I was brought up in the US, and just saw so much love and compassion and beauty in these people who have so little as far as material possessions and yet are filled with so much abundance and this sense of community that is so beautiful there, how they live in these little villages, and the families stay in these villages generation after generation, and there's no homeless people and people begging for food, and it's just like, for them it's unimaginable how you would let another human being go without food or a home. And I just remember feeling like, wow, this is how we're meant to live. And it was just such a beautiful awakening for me to see this possibility. And I guess for me, it created this possibility of living as soul family, and I think that's been the big shift. In the past, in indigenous cultures, they lived as blood families in community, and the blood families stayed together generation after generation. And one of the biggest shifts I've seen in terms of community is that because we have left our families in many ways, our blood families, and we live so much further apart than we ever have from our families, communities of today, the modern day communities, seem to be communities of soul families, where it goes beyond blood, and we're connecting with like-hearted individuals. And it's relatively new, or it is new way of living, in this way where we're not living together because we've been born into the same family, but we're actually coming together, finding each other, and trying to learn how to live together as brothers and sisters, and what that looks like. And it's a beautiful idea, and it's a beautiful vision, and it's a beautiful experience that we are living into and learning how to live in this way. And of course, it comes with its beauty, but also its challenges. And, if we look at a lot of the intentional communities around the world, I think over 90% of them end up falling apart and not really sustaining or growing together long term. And of course, we can go into that. And I think maybe I've spoken long enough, but, looking at some of the reasons why, and the difficulties of community, and the challenges of living together in a community in this time, perhaps it's something that we can all touch on.
Yeah. I so love that you took the light half of the equation and really went with it. Beautiful, magnificent. And sure, buddy, I'll handle the shallow. I'll handle the shadow. I'll handle the dark side here.
Well, that was also my my thoughts too, is like, I totally can relate to all the things that you've named, brother, and have also, been weaving in and out of the similar communities in the same places. Also having lived in Bali for a number of years, and Thailand for a number of years, and cycled through Peru, and there are these vortexes of places in the world where there are sort of this coming together of people, where so much, stepping out of sort of the matrix life that people are in these very conventional, conditioned ways of living that most people grow up in the Western world, at least, and then breaking out of some of that, and then stepping into some of these communities in these places that we've named. Like, it allowed me to live very differently than perhaps I would have otherwise. And yet there's also the shadow side to, all the things that you've named. It's, it takes a lot of, on some level, privilege to even be able to step out and travel to these places, and to, be able to live in these places and figure out a means to make a living, and also all the shadow side that comes with these so-called spiritual communities. And yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, Westerners coming together, certainly from all kinds of different countries. Like, there is an incredible amount of diversity of cultures, and yet, yeah, certain amount of privilege that comes with that. So not everybody can step into these kinds of ways of living. So I think it's important that that also gets named. And then, yeah, a lot of people who come together in these communities are from very westernized ways of living. So then, how do you, if it hasn't been role modeled to us how to live in community, then one comes in perhaps with a lot of idealism. And then when it actually comes down to, how to do it, then the difficulties and the challenges arise around, how to actually live in community with each other in ways that is workable. And I think, Troy, you've got a lot of experiences around that yourself, right?
With what in particular now?
Well, just living in communities and intentional communities that are perhaps very idealistic and then end up not going so well, or it falling apart because of human dynamics, right? And oftentimes the human dynamics that don't make these things sustainable is the shadow side of human dynamics, right? People have not necessarily dealt with their own stuff and don't know how to communicate. And, we can get into all the like challenges that happens in the interpersonal dynamics that then interferes with the success of these so-called communities. And yet we all keep trying. We all keep navigating these spaces together, right? And perhaps learning along the way how to do it better. And maybe also like stepping out of it and being more of a hermit, because it's like you kind of like, oh my God, I don't want to engage in that again. I'll just do it on my own. And then that comes with its own shadow side of, being in too much isolation, which I think we all have experience with as well, too, which I suppose is one of the reasons why we're talking about this, is just that swinging back and forth between idealizing being in community and then, ooh, that didn't go so well, and oh, I'll do it on my own. And then, that comes with its own territory of challenges. So like, how do we find our way with it?
Yeah, just to riff on what both of you have said, we have all found ourselves in these largely international, very international, but largely westernized communities around the world, vortexes, places that draw those of like mind. And of course, it starts with the vast majority of people that arrive at those places having been disaffected from their own culture and often their own families. So you have a lot of wounded souls that show up, and beautiful that there are places for us to go. But usually you would not leave your home, your family, your 3D conventional outward obvious community, your town, as it were, your hometown or whatever, unless there was something quite empty about it, or quite difficult about it, or some kind of sense within us that there's got to be something better. And most of us then don't necessarily have the kind of skills required to live in community, because again, it was never modeled for us, right? We didn't grow up in kind of a healthy, family-esque or community environment where there was mutual support, and there was also practice at sort of giving and taking in a healthy way, and supporting each other and allowing for growth and change and difficulty, right? So what happens is you get a lot of people showing up to these idealized and idyllic both kinds of places that are yearning for this sense of connection and community. Most of them, again, on the outside looking in from their own cultures, who want it, but don't necessarily have the skills to engage. And then we often find ourselves in relative isolation without even the kind of flexibility or the give and take that living in our larger homelands or something would allow for. Thrust together, pulled together, whatever it is, and then trying to figure out how to relate to each other, oftentimes as children, oftentimes without the skills beyond a childlike way of, no, that's mine, and I want this, and I want to sleep with that person, no, I do, and all the kinds of things that that come with it. And then, of course, you get people from outside of these realms or from within it. Let's just go with the word indigenous people that are already there and see this coming, who serve it well. And then you get other people who are very opportunistic from within that realm, but mostly it's people from the outside coming in to often to take advantage of or even prey on people and their sensibilities and their obvious vulnerabilities and such. Now, I'm just speaking to the shadow side here, while fully acknowledging all of the light that comes with it. But this is the reality. And so whether it's an ashram or a commune or, back to the landers buying, big chunks of land adjacent to each other, and everybody still kind of trying to do their own self-reliant thing, which is more of a Western and Northern trip, but still having to have some relationship with the people next to you. Even if you have 40 acres or 200 acres, you still have neighbors and there's easements. And it's just, how do we make this work? And it is primal, it is natural, it's completely unnatural to live any other way. So it is both inherent in our being, and then also in all of the nuclear families and separations and everything that we've had in these societies where wealth has allowed for people to live independently and separate from each other. It's like we try to figure it out anew. Neo tribalism, in some respect, neo community.
Well, just another piece around these kinds of communities that we've been talking about tend to be very youth oriented, right? It's a lot of people of certain age groups, somewhere usually averaging between like 25 and 45 perhaps, right? And so oftentimes there's a missing element of kind of the younger like families that and the dynamics that families bring. And then there's a really big missing component of elders, which is, in a broader societal context of our westernized world, is lacking anyways. But especially in these communities, there are no elders at all to give a sense of balance or wisdom or guidance or anything. So you have a lot of people who are very much youth oriented and kind of over the top with like, this is the way that we should be living, without the kind of life experience of people who have lived through this kind of stuff. So again, it's just looking at, the beauty of what happens in these kinds of communities and the freedom that people experience and the exploration, and also that which is lacking. And I think certainly coming, into a different phase of my own life, entering my 50s, I'm like now seeing how skewed it is with the youth oriented culture of these types of communities within the youth oriented focus of the larger society, which doesn't allow for really important rites of passage that happen through the life cycle, right? Like we're meant to move through an entire life cycle that each phase of life brings very important lessons with it. And our entire modern society is pretty much stuck at the stage of adolescence, right? You can be a 50-year-old adolescent, which you tend to see, especially in these communities, very concentrated. So yeah, I certainly find myself more and more seeking, like, where are the communities that have more balance?
Well, I can say that I've seen and been a part of the communities of the younger 25 to 40-year-olds like you're talking about, and now a part of a communal living where it is families that are leaving the conventional way of life, and a lot of people feeling adverse to the system and wanting to get out of the system. And so now experiencing community more around families that are selling their homes and buying campers and looking for an alternative way of life, which brings a whole other element to community and communal living as well. So yeah, there's so many dynamics and so many different expressions of community happening. I'm curious from your guys' perspective, what is the driving force that is causing people to look for these types of communities and alternative ways of living?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
It's the breakdown of society. It's societies not living up to the promises they've made their own citizens. And that's primarily due to hyper capitalism, the excesses and extremes of capitalism, the greed that has taken hold. I was just coming across some facts recently that were startling. They always are. And this is a bit of an aside, but apparently 66 people now own half of the world's physical resources, and about 2,000 people own about 95%. The bottom half, as it were, of humanity has just 0.75%. Half of us are living on 0.75% of the Earth's resources. So even those of us that come from relatively privileged backgrounds, and that's an interesting concept to explore too, because from the perspective of a Balinese people, we probably arrived seeming very poor, spiritually disconnected with our families, these poor souls, So there's that as well. So yes, we come from these privileged societies very often. Some are a little healthier than others. Obviously, like Norway is a bit more balanced than, say, the United States, but we've got homeless people all over the place. We've got people falling through the cracks, desperately trying to hang in there without a social safety net, et cetera. So people are fleeing that, or at least more willing to take a chance. Like, I don't know what else is out there. And I'm not sure even what I want, but I know I don't want this. There has to be something better, or at least I'm going to go look for it or die trying.
Well, and it seems that people are experiencing more and more of that squeeze, right? Like, it's more and more expensive and harder to keep up with all the things that come with Western life, right? Like, just to sustain yourself in a North American or European country, for the most part, people are incredibly squeezed, right? Like, they can't keep up with the amount of money it takes to just sustain a simple, life, like, rent and cost of vehicles and whatever goes with it. And plus then also people's need to have more and more and more and more. And we're conditioned, right? All the advertising, is all about you're not enough, you don't have enough, you need more, and people are overwhelmed. And so I think there is this movement, probably especially since COVID. People started to look for like alternatives. We may have been part of a wave of people who kind of figured that out before the squeeze got even, got to the point where it is now. We've all been out of the system for 20 years at least. But yeah, I imagine that, we're seeing that more and more now. And it also reminds me of like what the feudal systems were back hundreds of years ago, where there was like one king or royal family that sort of squeezed out all the peasants, and just may look different on the surface, but ultimately it's kind of the same energetic pattern, right? That we're starting to move back towards these extreme divisions of wealth. And yeah, maybe there's something to be learned from that. Or, if we look at energetic patterns that repeat, which, happens in our individual lives, but also happens at a collective level, perhaps there's something to be learned from that.
Let's hope so. I'd like to circle back to this idea of the disaffected not being evenly or equally represented by various people at different stages of life. I mean, for one, it tends to be overwhelmingly white. Just want to fully acknowledge and put that out there, because of course the Black and brown people from our respective cultures tend to be economically disadvantaged, and it's just less available to them. So there's that reality, there's that lack of representation often. Blessedly, increasingly, there's more and more of that, and I am just beside myself with joy in seeing that. I just feel so deeply pleased to see different people, especially from a diverse culture such as America, starting to be out there on the road, as it were. That said, there are few, if any, true adults and virtually no elders. And of course, there's a lot of things that are required of a youthful nature to break away and to try to create something new. There's a need for like idealism and excitement and joy and possibility and all of that. But also things like families provide some element of the bass note. If it's all young kids, it's like too tinny. It's like the high end of the musical spectrum. So families are kind of like the mid-range of, I'm sounding like a sound engineering expert. You can tell from my audio quality, I'm not. And elders provide the bass note. Elders who know how to hold the space, who have witnessed a lifetime for the most part come and flow and go, and the highs and the lows, and have the love and compassion and wisdom to hold it all, to be there as support. Without any of those elements, it's shaky. The foundation isn't there, so the walls are a little bit wobbly, and the roof, oh, don't even get me started about the roof.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that as well, brother. It's well, seeing all three of those aspects, and yeah, there's just not a lot of examples out there of, and we're just kind of blindly going into this and trying to find our way. What I see here in Portugal, in Spain and Portugal, has become such a hotbed for people leaving their conventional lives in Europe and traditional ways of living and coming to Spain and Portugal because the land is cheap here, and a lot of people are coming here to find alternative ways of life. And it's almost like a beacon that's been sent out, and these families are hearing about this possibility. And it's like you said, I'm not sure what we're getting into, but I know we don't want to keep living this way anymore. And they start coming here in their camper vans. And I think I shared this with you before, Troy, a couple months ago when you were here, that the conversation that I have with people is so similar. These families come and I meet them and they're like, how you guys doing? How long you've been on the road? Oh yeah, we sold our home back in Holland, and we bought our camper van, and we have our kids with us. And yeah, we've been on the road for 6 weeks. And how's it been going? Yeah, it's wow, so beautiful, and to be on the road and have all these experiences. And I can hear like in the background what they're not sharing with me. And then I look at them and I go, and it's really, really difficult as well, isn't it? And they're like, oh my God, yeah, it's so hard, being in a camper van with kids. And it's like, they're leaving something that they don't want to be a part of anymore. And yet they have no idea what they're stepping into. This kind of utopian vision of living off grid and living more simple. It comes with its own inherent challenges as well, of course. And that could be a whole other episode. But yeah, I just see a lot of people searching, a lot of people searching for something that feels connected and feels sustainable and feels grounded in maybe some deeper sense of safety and security and sustainability going forward in a world that is increasingly less and less predictable.
Yes. And at the same time, it may well be that having skills that allow one to be mobile, let's just call it gypsy ability, right? To the ability to be and remain transient is one aspect of being a traveler. A lot of these communities are transient, and that is part of the problem. The tap roots haven't grown in. And yet it may well be that the only way that we survive and possibly thrive to any degree is to be semi-nomadic, to be somewhat mobile. It may be what's coming. And you know what else is coming? Us. We are the elders. We are going to be the elders. You could say we're elders in training now, but at some point, we're going to be that. That will be our role to inhabit, should we choose. That will be yet another way we serve.
Indeed. Yeah, I already have my gray beard, so I'm almost there.
I mean, in some ways, there's an irony to the kind of that notion of being nomadic and, you know, that perhaps that's what's required. And yet, I think that there is something that we deeply miss, whether we know it or not, right? That notion of the tap roots. It's like, as humans, we are connected to the land. We are connected to some, you know, there needs to be a relationship with the land. And if we are constantly transient, we never have the opportunity to grow our roots into the earth. I mean, I see this from my own life. I've been very nomadic all my life, which probably is what set up the pattern in my adulthood. But just my childhood was we moved a lot and among, you know, different countries and continents. And so there wasn't sort of that connection set up with the land, and even seeing the seasons change, you know, to be in one place where you have the opportunity to watch the seasons of a tree or the birds that come and go through the seasons, or the, you know, the changes of seasons themselves. We have very, very deep ancestral connections to that kind of way of living. We're part of the earth. And I certainly feel that plant medicine has given me a lot more, you know, of that recognition back. But I still yearn for a connection with a place on the earth, and find that that's a real struggle for me personally, is like, well, where is my place on earth, especially if I've never really had a place. And at the same time, I mean, the nomadic life does bring a lot of, excitement and flow and freedom and all of that. So it's like, where do you find the happy medium between the two, recognizing that a connection with the earth and land is super essential to who we are as human beings, and being in a balanced relationship with the earth as well, and each other.
I'm so glad you spoke to that, Simone. I think it's important to acknowledge here that even true nomadic societies, one, always stayed together, and two, had the same migration patterns every year. So they were connected to the land, and they would revisit the same tree or oases or whatever. And sometimes even in the pre-agriculture times, throw some seeds out to maybe come around the next year. So, you know, the way that we're like jumping in airplanes and flying around and living here for a while and then living there for a little while. I mean, this is, as brother spoke to, totally new for the human being to experience.
Yeah, and look at the technology, like look at us, right? We're in different parts of the world, and here we are connecting with each other on these screens and using technology. And there's beauty in the ability to do that. That's never been done before in the history of humanity, right? That I can talk to Troy in northern Thailand and brother in Portugal, and I'm in southern Thailand, and yet if we were all sitting together in our booth in our universal diner, that, you know, in person, there would be a different, like, there's something in our nervous systems that requires personal connection and personal, like, just being with each other. We don't even have to talk, right? It's just like being in each other's presence as community, as family, as, you know, relations. There's medicine. There's a really important medicine in that on the one hand, we're lacking because we don't get to hang out with each other in person that much. And thankfully, we have technology where we can at least do this.
Okay, it's settled. You guys are moving to Portugal. Let's go. I'll find the diner. You guys go.
Well, I think I
Yeah,
know
that's true.
the closest diner to you. We could
Yes,
just rent a corner.
absolutely.
With age and or eldership, I certainly feel the lessening of the appeal of travel, and even of the sort of abstract notion of external freedom, that even if one doesn't travel, one could always do it. That's less and less important to me. And what is more and more appealing is exactly what you were just speaking to, Simone. Roots, ground, culture, familiarity, pattern. It will probably not be in my homeland. And so there'll always be some degree of novelty, and you'll always be a little bit of an outsider in all probability in most other places that you would go. And yet that's what feels like the natural unfoldment of a naturally lived life. It is here I make my stand, and it is here that I share my gifts as an elder, just as an experienced human, if that word doesn't work, just as a human being that has not just made it, which is to be honored, but that really went for it in many respects, in many ways, and lived to tell the tale. And what a tale it is. And here, let me offer this to you now, so that your way, young one, may be brighter, less dangerous, more rewarding.
Well, and just the notion of feeling held, right? Like, I think there's such a, I don't think we're even that conscious of what it means to feel held by someone who has more life experience, who has come to a place of, heart-centered living through their own life experience. And perhaps that's a big part of what is lacking for so many humans, is not even knowing what it feels like to be safe, to feel held, to feel cared for, to, there's so much in our culture, especially North American culture and American culture, that seeps into the world around this individualism, right? You've got to make it on your own, and that too is a myth.
A very harmful one.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, we could be going in all kinds of different directions with this. It's so much to be said about it.
Well, I like the idea of leaving off at this juicy precipice, shall we say, on this juicy note, so that it's here full of juice to pick up again.
Indeed.
Sounds good.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. May this serve you in some way. Bless you, and we'll see you next time.